In a quiet neighborhood in Quezon City, where jeepneys roar like restless lions and children laugh in the afternoon sun, there stood a small carinderia called Lutong Bahay ni Rico. It wasn't fancy. The paint peeled in corners, the tables were uneven, and the fan creaked like an old man sighing. But the food was unforgettable, especially one dish, Rico's sweet spaghetti. Unlike the glossy Italian plates served in fine restaurants, his spaghetti was unapologetically Filipino. Bright red from banana ketchup, dotted with hot dog slices, and sprinkled with grated cheese that melted into a creamy mess. It was childhood in a bowl. The taste of birthday parties and Noche Buena dinners, the comfort of home. Rico De Guzman, the man behind it all, was not a trained chef. He never studied in Le Cordon Bleu or Rome's culinary academies. He learned everything from his mother, who once ran a turo stall near the wet market. When she passed away, he took over the small shop, determined to keep her recipes alive, even when business barely broke even. But Rico had a dream, a wild, ridiculous dream. He wanted the world to know Filipino food. Not just adobo or lumpia, but the everyday dishes that defined who Filipinos were. Simple, resourceful, full of love. And he believed his sweet spaghetti could do that. It wasn't Italian, and it didn't try to be. It was proudly Filipino, joyful, sentimental, a little too sweet, just like the people who made it. One humid evening after closing time, Rico sat by the counter scrolling through his phone. Between videos of food hacks and news reports, something caught his eye. A global culinary competition titled the World Taste Championship. It would be held in Rome, Italy, the homeland of pasta itself. The theme, tradition versus reinvention. Rico's hand froze above the screen. A wild thought sparked in his mind. What if he brought Filipino spaghetti there? He laughed it off at first. Compete against Michelin-starred chefs? From Italy, France, Japan? It sounded absurd. He couldn't even afford a plane ticket. His kitchen didn't have fancy equipment, just an old gas stove, a pot with one missing handle, and faith. But that night, as he washed the last dishes and turned off the lights, his mother's voice echoed in his head. Anak, food isn't about perfection. It's about the story you tell. He stared at his reflection in the metal sink. The story he wanted to tell. Of family, of sweetness and struggle, of joy and imperfection, was inside that bright red sauce. So he applied. It took him an entire night to fill out the online form. He uploaded photos of his carinderia, his spaghetti, his smile that was equal parts pride and fear. He didn't expect anything. He didn't even tell anyone. Weeks passed. Business went on as usual. Tricycle drivers came for lunch, kids after school ordered extra cheese, and lovers shared a plate between laughter. Then one afternoon, as Rico was chopping onions, his phone buzzed. The subject line made his heart stop. Congratulations. You've been selected as a finalist for the World Taste Championship. He dropped the knife. The customers looked up as he stood frozen, the email glowing on his cracked screen. Out of thousands of entries from around the world, 10 had been chosen. And one of them was from the Philippines. He couldn't believe it. His customers cheered when he told them. Someone even brought out a karaoke mic to celebrate. But behind the laughter, Rico felt a storm of anxiety brewing. He'd be facing the best chefs on the planet, Italians who'd spent their lives mastering pasta, who believed in tradition with religious devotion. And he, a carinderia cook with banana ketchup and hot dogs, was bringing sweet spaghetti to Rome. The next weeks were chaos. He borrowed money to buy a plane ticket. Friends pitched in, saying, "Para sa Pilipinas, Rico!" His regular customers helped design a shirt that read Pinoy pride in bold letters. Even the barangay captain came to wish him luck. Before he left, Rico visited his mother's grave. He brought a small plate of spaghetti, steaming under the morning sun. "Ma," he whispered, "we're going to Italy." Rome was overwhelming. The air smelled like espresso and marble dust. The city hummed with history, ancient ruins, golden churches, cobblestone streets that seemed to whisper stories of emperors and artists. Rico had never left the Philippines before. He didn't even own a suitcase until a neighbor lent him one. The competition venue was like something out of a dream. A grand hall filled with chefs in pristine white jackets, camera crews, and judges whose faces he'd only seen on Netflix. The event was being live-streamed worldwide. Each chef had their station. gleaming stainless steel counters, digital thermometers, and sous chefs moving like clockwork. Rico stood at his small assigned corner with his luggage of ingredients: banana ketchup, hot dogs, condensed milk, and packs of local spaghetti noodles. The other contestants stared. One Italian chef whispered, loud enough for others to hear, "Is he serious? Sweet spaghetti?" Another chuckled. "Maybe he thinks this is a children's party." Rico smiled politely, even as his chest tightened. He didn't come to fight, he came to cook. The host introduced each competitor. From France, Chef Lucien, master of contemporary cuisine. From Japan, Chef Hiro Tanaka, molecular gastronomy expert. And from the Philippines. The host hesitated, glancing at Rico's modest station. Chef Rico De Guzman, representing Filipino traditional flavors. A polite applause followed. Some cameras panned toward him, curious, almost pitying. When the theme was announced, reinvent a national classic, Rico knew this was his moment. The Italians would cook perfection. He would cook memory. He began to move. His hands shook, but soon muscle memory took over. He boiled water, dropped the noodles, and smiled at the sizzle of hot dogs frying in oil. He mixed the banana ketchup with tomato paste, sugar, and a secret spoonful of condensed milk. The sauce turned deep red, sweet and fragrant, filling the air with something warm and nostalgic. The Italian chefs frowned. One whispered, "He's putting sugar in it." Another shook his head. "That's sacrilege." But when Rico poured the sauce over the noodles, the color gleamed like celebration. He sprinkled grated cheese on top, not Parmesan, but cheddar, the kind you'd find at Filipino birthday parties. As the clock ticked down, the judges walked around, observing. They stopped at Rico's station. The French judge raised an eyebrow. "Monsieur Rico, you call this spaghetti?" Rico nodded, his voice steady. "Yes, sir. Filipino spaghetti." The Italian judge looked puzzled. "Sweet? Why sweet?" Rico smiled softly. "Because life in my country is hard, sir. Sometimes all we can afford is sugar to make it better. It's the taste of hope." For a brief moment, no one spoke. Then the timer beeped. Time was up. Each chef presented their dish. The Italians served perfection: al dente noodles in glossy tomato sauce, basil leaves placed with surgical precision. The French chef offered truffle-infused pasta. The Japanese chef unveiled a molecular carbonara that looked like art. Then it was Rico's turn. He stepped forward with a humble white plate, steam curling from the noodles. "This," he said quietly, "is how we celebrate back home. Birthdays, Christmas, simple joys. This is Filipino spaghetti." The judges took a bite. The Italian judge blinked, surprised. "It's different." The French one nodded slowly. "Sweet, childlike, but comforting." And the American food critic smiled. "It tastes like a story." Rico bowed. "It is, sir. It's the story of my mother." The audience applauded softly. Some still looked amused, others intrigued. But something had shifted. Curiosity replacing mockery. That night, Rico walked through the streets of Rome alone. The city lights shimmered on the Tiber River. He didn't know if he'd win, but that didn't matter. He had already done something no one believed possible. He made the world taste a piece of the Philippines. But as he looked across the water, he didn't see the end of his journey. He saw a spark. Because what happened the next day would change everything. The next morning, the air inside the Grand Culinary Hall of Rome was thick with anticipation. A sea of spectators filled the golden balconies, journalists readied their cameras, and chefs from around the world whispered predictions about who would take home the title. On a long marble table stood the 10 final dishes from yesterday's challenge, covered, waiting to be judged one last time. Rico barely slept. His eyes were tired, but his spirit burned quietly. He wore the same white apron from his carinderia back home, the one with faint red stains from years of tomato sauce. To him, it was armor. The judges arrived with quiet ceremony, 5 culinary legends from 5 continents. At the center of the table sat the head judge, Enrico Valdini, Italy's most revered pasta maestro. His face was calm, unreadable, but his eyes carried the weight of generations of tradition. When it was Rico's turn, his dish was unveiled once again. The color seemed even brighter under the morning light, vibrant, red-orange, cheerful, unapologetic. A few people chuckled softly. "Here it is," someone whispered. "The children's party pasta." But Valdini leaned in, eyes narrowing. He twirled the fork, lifted a bite, and paused. The sauce clung to the noodles differently, thicker, almost caramelized. He took the bite slowly, the room holding its breath. Silence. Then another bite, and another. Finally, Valdini spoke. "This breaks every rule I know." A murmur rippled through the audience. He continued, his voice measured but curious. "Too sweet. Too soft. The wrong cheese. Yet..." He set the fork down, eyes glistening. "It reminds me of my mother's kitchen in Naples, when we had no money, and she would add a little sugar to the sauce to make it last longer." The hall went still. Even the other judges looked surprised. The French judge nodded thoughtfully. "It carries emotion," she said. "You cannot teach that." The camera zoomed in on Rico. He stood there, hands clasped tightly in front of him, trembling but smiling. "Thank you, sir," he said softly. "That's exactly why I made it." As the next dishes were judged, whispers filled the room. For the first time, the Filipino spaghetti wasn't a joke. It was a question, a challenge. By afternoon, the scores were tallied. The top 3 chefs were called to the stage: Chef Lucien from France, Chef Marco Rossi from Italy, and Rico De Guzman from the Philippines. The crowd gasped when they heard his name. He could hardly believe it himself. Standing beside the Italian and French masters, he looked small, just a man from a small eatery with nothing but a story. But the host announced, "For the final challenge, our top 3 will create a fusion dish, blending their own heritage with one of their rivals." Rico's opponent was chosen by draw. He felt his heart sink as the paper was lifted. Chef Marco Rossi, the Italian prodigy himself. Marco smirked as they shook hands. "I respect what you did yesterday," he said, his tone half sincere, half mocking. "But don't expect luck to repeat. Today, you're in my world." Rico smiled gently. "Then I'll bring mine with me." The challenge began. 90 minutes on the clock. The stage came alive with movement. Knives flashing, pans sizzling, cameras swirling. Marco moved with sharp, precise rhythm, cooking like a conductor leading an orchestra. He prepared fresh pasta by hand, eggs and flour swirling together with confident elegance. Rico, meanwhile, opened a small jar of banana ketchup, the same one from home. He mixed it carefully with diced tomatoes, a hint of sugar, and a spoonful of olive oil, a bridge between 2 worlds. Marco looked over, shaking his head. "Still with the ketchup, my friend?" Rico nodded. "Still with the heart." As the minutes melted away, Rico worked quietly. He grilled slices of Italian sausage, blending their smoky saltiness with the sweetness of his sauce. He used local cheese, Parmesan, but folded it gently into his Filipino-style mixture, creating something new, a balance between comfort and class. When time was called, both men stepped back. 2 plates sat side by side, one perfect and traditional, the other bright and unexpected. The judges began with Marco's. It was flawless. Texture, aroma, technique. Applause followed every bite. Then they turned to Rico's dish. The aroma of sweetness filled the room again, but this time layered with the earthiness of Italian herbs. The first judge took a cautious forkful, then widened her eyes. "This shouldn't work," she murmured. "But it does." Another judge leaned in. "It's the meeting of 2 souls, the structure of Italy and the emotion of the Philippines." Rico's hands were shaking. He didn't dare look up. Finally, Valdini spoke again. "Mr. De Guzman," he said softly, "what do you call this creation?" Rico smiled. "Spaghetti alla kaligayahan," he replied. "Spaghetti of happiness." Laughter filled the hall. Not mocking this time, but warm, genuine. Even Marco cracked a reluctant smile. When the results were announced, the hall was silent. 3rd place, Chef Lucien, France. 2nd place, Chef Marco Rossi, Italy. 1st place, Chef Rico De Guzman, Philippines. The crowd erupted. Filipino flags waved in the stands. Reporters rushed forward. Rico couldn't move. Tears streamed down his face as he looked at the golden trophy, shaped like a fork, trembling in his hands. Madame Colette took the mic. "Today," she said, "the world has learned something. That greatness doesn't come from imitation. It comes from courage." She turned to Rico. "You did not just bring sweetness to pasta. You brought humanity to the table." Back home, news spread like wildfire. His carinderia flooded with people, locals, tourists, even foreign chefs wanting to taste the famous sweet spaghetti that defeated Italy. Children sang his name on the streets. His mother's photo hung proudly above the counter, smiling down at the crowd. That night, as the neon lights of Manila glowed outside, Rico sat quietly behind the counter, stirring a fresh pot of sauce. "Ma," he whispered, "they know us now." But somewhere deep inside, he knew this was only the beginning. Because once the world tasted sweetness, it would never forget.